Science tells us all the time that when people like you, they're more likely to do things for you. And the same exact thing is true for women, right? When women find a man attractive, when they are attracted to a man, they're more likely to comply to that man. Everyone knows this on some level. What most people don't seem to understand is that a woman's compliance has a linear path that it travels. And about 3 or 4 years ago now, I came up with my own visual representation of what that linear path looks like. I call it the compliance ladder. Basically, think of this as my own visual representation, how it looks like in my head, of what it looks like to take a woman from a complete stranger to completely obsessed with you. And yes, there's a linear path, there's a bit of a climb that you have to go through. That's why I call it a ladder. And the deeper into this you go, the better you understand investment, how women actually invest in a man over time. You see, when I first created this, I created this for two major reasons. The first is the obvious, right? Which is compliance is the most important part of the game by far, because of everything that you'll ever ask me to give you, compliance is really all you're ever asking me, right? The reason you're watching my channel right now is because you want whatever woman or whatever women you are dealing with or plan to deal with in the future to behave in a certain way. That's compliance, right? So understanding how to get that and get that consistently and use that to create more investment over time, it's a very important skill, just about one of the most important skills you can learn in game. But the second and more important reason is to create a map of sorts, a blueprint for knowing where you stand with a woman at any given time, and as a result, alleviating yourself of anxiety of not knowing, right? Turns out that's a big problem for a lot of men out there, not knowing where they stand with a woman. Understanding this will completely alleviate you of that anxiety, that fear, that nervous energy forever. So let's get into this. This is the compliance ladder, right? Check it out. The more a woman complies to you, the more investment she gives to you. And the more she's invested in you, the more attracted she is to you. Now, that's an easy, straightforward way of putting it, but the truth is that in itself is cyclical. The more a woman is attracted to you, the more she's willing to comply to you. And the more she's willing to comply to you, the more invested she is in you. And the more investment she has in you, the higher her attraction for you goes up. And it just keeps going on like that and like that and like that. The same thing, though, is true for how things go in the reverse, which is defiance. You see, as you can go up this compliance ladder, you can also go down the compliance ladder. So both directions are very true with how this works. You can go up it, you can go down it. And when it comes to going down, it all comes down to defiance. The less she's willing to take your instruction, the less invested she is in you. And as a result, the less attracted she is in you. And I've decided to use the word repulsion to make it stick out in your head, right? But that's the first thing you need to understand about how the compliance ladder works. As you can see, there's a few things here that stick out when we're looking at the compliance ladder. These are called checkpoints. And these checkpoints are, think about them like gateways that you have to pass through to get further up the compliance ladder stages. Before we even get into the checkpoints, let's talk about the stages themselves. At the bottom stage, we have the general compliance. These are the basic levels of compliance that you can get from just about any woman with very little effort on her part. So this is being able to get her number and her real number, not a fake one. This is even getting her Instagram, I guess, would kind of count into that. This would be her actually agreeing to shake your hand when you reach out to shake hers. This would be her willing to spin around when you give her the gesture to actually spin around for you. This would be actually replying to your text or swiping right on you on Tinder. The tiny things, the basic level things that would need to happen for there to be any kind of a relationship of consequence going forward, right? That's general investment. Now, pay attention to how general compliance works, right? It doesn't take a lot of investment on her part. Plus, she can do this for just about anybody. There's not such a high barrier to entry when it comes to this level of compliance. It's very low effort, none too crazy, right? Now, you get past into the second stage, what you have is value investment and sacrifice. Now it's getting a little more serious. First, you have to pass the sex checkpoint to get to that point, right? We'll talk more about checkpoints, but for now, understand that in order to get to this stage, you have to get past sex. And by the way, just to also mention this as a side note, but everything from this point is what we call the back end of game. This is all referred to as back end, and everything before that point is called the front end of game. This is your, social circle, cold approach pickup, online dating, etc. Right? So you have meeting the girl somewhere around here, you have taking her number somewhere around here, using the phone number to set up a date here, conducting the date here, sexualizing the actual date when you're on it, and then boom, you have sex with her. You now entered the back end. Why is sex such a pivotal thing? Well, it's because of how the checkpoints in the compliance ladder works. Now, pay attention when we're talking about checkpoints here. The checkpoints stick out like that for a reason. They're very pivotal moments in the entirety of the compliance ladder. They are like I said, gateways that you need to get into the next stage of compliance. They're that pivotal, they're that important. And to go from general compliance to value investment or sacrifice, you need to get past sex. That is the first most important checkpoint to get past in order to get to that next level. If you don't get past this very pivotal moment, which is sex and copulation, you're not going to get into this level. Simple as that. A woman is less invested in you when she hasn't had sex with you yet. You should know this by now. Now, once you mess around in value investment and sacrifice, and by the way, this is what that looks like. That is all those things that you do within this stage that are a lot higher in compliance than the general level. So by this point, you're like getting her number, getting her to reply text, small things like that. By this point, now she's agreeing to offer to take you on dates, agreeing to make better, more significant sacrifices for you, agreeing to do things out of her way or go out of her way to run errands for you, let you lend things from her, maybe even indefinitely, right? This is where you get all these things. So you can put being able to borrow her car right there. You can put stuff like willing to do unorthodox things for you. This is where all those things come in. So that's value investment. Once you're stuck, once you play around in here for a bit, once you play around in here for a bit of time, then you get into the next phase of things. That is deep connection. And in order to get into that stage, you need to get past the next checkpoint, which is love. See, so love is the next major checkpoint right after sex. If you can't get past this point, if you can't allow her to think in her mind that she is at this stage with you, then you're not going to get into deep connection. Love is the license into deep connection. Anyone that tries to tell you that you can create a deep, lasting connection with a woman without first getting her to convince herself, essentially, that she is in love with you, they're lying to you. They're lying to you. That's not how it works. A woman isn't even comfortable to begin with to get into that next stage of deep connection with you until and unless she's swept away by her emotions to this point, love. And then finally, after you get past deep connection, the very next stage is what we call obsession. And the checkpoint to get past there is what I like to call hypnotic rhythm. Hypnotic rhythm is a term that I borrow from a book called Outwitting the Devil, written by a man named Napoleon Hill. I'm sure you know who that is. And he has this book called Outwitting the Devil, where he talks about the law of hypnotic rhythm, a law that essentially is the law of the universe that sets things in place and sets things in motion. And that is exactly why I borrowed that term for this stage here, because that is how this stage works. When you want to get a girl into obsession, you have to understand that what you're really doing is keeping her in place so that when she's in love with you and her love for you increases significantly, she is now in pretty much autopilot. So you can think of obsession as autopilot love. That's a funny way to look at it, but that's essentially what it is. It's love on autopilot. And so when you get past hypnotic rhythm, or you trigger hypnotic rhythm, you have the ability to get a woman to a point of obsession. And at this point, she really doesn't have any control over herself, which is something that I have to probably talk about right now. Check this out. A woman's ultimate goal when it comes to this entire compliance ladder is to make sure, to the best of her ability, that you don't get to this point. obsession. Women are obsessive creatures, but they're also very terrified of being obsessed with you. Why? Because when a woman is truly obsessed with a man or anything really, she completely loses control of herself, right? Obsession is a scary thing for women because they understand that they essentially suspend their own disbelief and let go of all logic. So anything and anyone that they're obsessed with has power over them. They're very aware of this, and that is a scary thing for women. To relinquish that level of control to someone else, that is very scary. There's not enough trust in the world for them to do that willingly, right? So a woman's job is to make sure on some level you don't get to this point with her. Not because it doesn't feel good for them, not because it's so terrifying. In fact, it's very euphoric for them. We'll talk about that later. But for the most part, it's still a very scary endeavor. They can't let just anyone get to that point. And that's regardless of if the woman has a high or low barrier to entry. Because here's how it works, right? Here's the thing. Depending on the woman's own level of discipline and life experience and other different factors like that, her barrier to entry to get past this first checkpoint right here, sex, is going to be higher or lower, right? Here's what I've noticed though, and this is the weirdest thing ever. Even if her barrier to entry to get to this point is super low, you're still going to have to put in significant amount of work to get to obsession. So there's only two kinds of women you'll ever run into when it comes to this. The women that make you, put in significantly more work to get to this point and eventually will help you get to this point a lot quicker, or the women that don't let you do a lot of work to get here. I'm talking about the two extremes, by the way. I'm not saying these are the only two kinds of women, but as two different extremes, you have the other extreme of women that'll let you get here very quickly, but ironically, to get to this point of obsession, yeah, good luck with that. So that's what we usually refer to in, other studies. I've heard the red pill guys talk about it like an inability to pair bond. That's not what it is. Pair bonding itself doesn't even really exist. To say that we pair bond is to insinuate that we're monogamous creatures, which is false, but that's an entirely different video. The point is, what they're referring to as pair bonding, that phenomena isn't pair bonding. It's just this right here. It's the fact that when a woman has a lower barrier to entry to passing these initial checkpoints, usually it's even harder to get to the other checkpoints. And so you can call that one of the major principles of the compliance ladder along with this. So like I said, you can go up or down the compliance ladder. There is no stagnation when it comes to compliance. It doesn't really exist. As far as we're talking about going up and down the compliance ladder, you can't really stay stuck in any level for any significant period of time. You're either going up the ladder or you're going down the ladder, right? An example would be not just think about the fact that breakups in general exist, but think about the fact that whenever guys usually get to this point right here, sex, they get really lazy. And they don't understand that they have to keep working to get up the compliance ladder. If you're not working to get up the compliance ladder, by definition, you're going down the ladder. So, a thing you should keep in the back of your mind while you're going up the compliance ladder is that you should remain greedy. The greedier guys always have success when it comes to climbing up the ladder. Why? Because when you're greedy, you want more. When you want more, you're going to ask for more. When you ask for more compliance, you get more investment and you go up the compliance ladder. It's the guys that get comfortable getting stuck anywhere that usually have a hard time, going up the ladder. And if anything, they keep, backsliding. They keep finding themselves right at the bottom of the ladder again, which is why breakups exist, right? So you should definitely be keeping that in mind. On top of that, there's also the issue of men not knowing how to pass each checkpoint, right? Because I call each checkpoint a gateway into the next stage of the compliance ladder, but in reality, we can just call them tests, because that's what they are. With each checkpoint comes its own unique test, and you have to pass that test in order to get to the next level. It's like a video game, right? Think about it like if you played Pokemon. That's the analogy I like to use whenever I talk about the compliance ladder. If you played Pokemon, this right here would be the first gym leader, this would be the last gym leader, and this would be the Pokemon League, right? Or if you were more of a sports fan, this is the preseason games, these are the regular season games, and these are the playoffs slash Super Bowl, right? Same concept, right? It's. I mean, there's a reason we call it game, isn't there? It's gamified, and so just like any good game, the higher up you go, the more difficult the bosses get, right? So the lower tests are not as hard as the higher tests, and that kind of makes sense if you think about it. Think about a real life example. It's way easier to get sex out of a girl than it is to get her to fall in love with you, and it's way easier to get a girl to fall in love with you than it is to get her to be completely, utterly obsessed with you, right? So you got to think about each checkpoint as a test you must pass. Now, let me go over that real quick for you so you understand this. In order to get past this checkpoint, the first checkpoint of sex, it's actually very simple. How do you do it? Well, congruence. The major test that you're going to get at this stage is a test of your confidence, your identity as a person. It's mostly going to be verbal and psychological. She's just going to try to get to see who you really are on some level, like who you believe yourself to be and how strongly you believe in that. But for the most part, you can get past this with just your words, right? It's verbal. If at all you use action, it's going to be just behavioral cues, the subtle things that your body is telling her, but that's about it. Very easy. Like I said, it's all the things that are related to a front end of game, pickup, and it's relatively easier than the next stage, which is love. In order to get past this checkpoint, you're not only going to use words, but a lot of action, right? Because at this point, now she's also more emotionally invested in you, which means she knows more about you, which means she now has more ammo to test you with and fire against you. So not only are you going to use your words and a stronger psychology, but your actions have to be matched up as well, right? This is why a lot of guys can't seem to cross into the love stage of things or get a woman to fall in love with them, because maybe they even pass this stage incorrectly, right? And that can happen. You can have favor in the lower stages and have that be the very reason you can't get past the next stages, right? If you pass the previous stages incorrectly, you might have trouble getting up there later on, because if you lie to her in this stage and you get one over on her and lie about how much you believe in yourself and how confident you are in yourself, well, at some point she's actually going to test it for real. And if you can't pass that, drop all the way back down, right? So this is just a test of your congruence. This one is a test of who you are in general, like up close and personal. And then to get to this point, hypnotic rhythm, this is a test of completion. This is a big deal, completion. I'm gonna write that down, because everything has been leading up to this point. You have to be the complete package. And when I say that, I'm not just talking about physical endeavor, having all these different boxes checked on a physical plane, because that's all just one box to check, which is physical. There's also the spiritual side of things, there's the emotional side of things, the mental and psychological side of things, the social side of things, right? If you want to get a girl to complete obsession and be in hypnotic rhythm, you need to get to completion. And you need to pass a test that will test for how complete you believe yourself to be. This is like the difference between being tested for being the shit versus being tested for being a god. Entirely different level, right? So it's not just a test of confidence. It's a test of complete oneness with the ultimate, if you want to call it that. It's a test of complete oneness with what you might refer to as the God being, right? But we're getting a little too deep into that. For the most part, this is all you need to know right now about how the compliance ladder works, the different little quirks here and there. I know I might have jumped from one thing to the other a little too quickly, but don't worry, this is a multi-part series. We will be talking about the compliance ladder in multiple different parts, and this is going to be part one. But for the most part, go over this again as many times as you can. The more the better, obviously, and keep these principles in mind. You can go up and down the compliance ladder. You're only ever going up or down the compliance ladder. There's no stagnation where you just kind of float and don't do anything. And there are major tests as you go up, and the higher up you go, the harder the tests get. All right. Now, after learning about how compliance works and the compliance ladder in general and all these things, obviously, again, like I said, we're going to go through some more stuff in part two. But in the meantime, if you want to really get into understanding a lot of things about gaming, things that will help you actually go up this compliance ladder even better, you probably should start learning a little bit more about your own psychology. May I suggest watching this video right here about how to handle rejection. If you cannot handle rejection, which is a natural, normal part of dealing with women, you're not going to be able to deal with all the rejection that you're possibly going to face while you're going up the compliance ladder. Like I said, you're going to get a bunch of tests going up this ladder. A lot of those tests do look like flat out rejection, and you're going to have to learn how to navigate those things. So it's better you psychologically prepare yourself for that, right? So watch this video right here. Go learn how to handle your fear of rejection. It's been Jason, favorite scientist, with all this information. What you must.